Julissa, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's so good to have you here. I am so excited for our conversation.
I am excited for our conversation too. Thank you so much for having me here.
So, Julissa, share with us your story. Share with us how you got to do what you do today.
Yes, so I'll try to keep it brief, right?
Yeah,
So it all started, no, I'm just kidding.
I was born.
I was born in a little, no, just kidding. But I was born in Santiago in the Dominican Republic. Yes, and I consider myself a very proud Dominican immigrant in the US. My journey comes from, those immigrant roots with my family, very close ties to my country and all the values that we hold dear, right, in our hearts. After college, I worked in the tech industry, started working at a tech startup in Newark, New Jersey, and really got my feet wet and learned a lot about technology then and had very early success. And from there, I was recruited into Microsoft. I spent 13, almost 14 years there. From there, recruited to Salesforce, did some work there. And then I started my own business. I took some time off. I had a family member that had an illness that I needed to take care of. So I think it's also important to talk about not just career, but career and life, right? Because we're impacted by life. So I took some time and took care of my family member and then joined a high growth company here in New Jersey. And then from there, recruited back into Salesforce and did some work there. But my work has really been around operations, sales strategy, sales execution, product development, and partnerships and alliances. So I've had an over 25-year career in the tech industry. And now I run my own business strategy consulting firm. So I help companies and really consulting companies help their customers build their partner ecosystem strategy and all the components that are required. I've written a book about my experience as
Yay.
a brown Latina. And so that will be coming out on September 15th, the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. And I'm a speaker and author. And yeah, so I hope that was brief enough.
Wait, no, but no, this is great because now there's so much we can talk about. I would love for you to talk more about the different, if there are any patterns in terms of how you approached and how you thought about the different pivots you had in your career. Because a lot of people listening
Yes.
are either at inflection points or they're thinking about reassessing their career or their lifestyle or whatever it is. And so I think it'd be interesting for you to walk us through. Is there anything that you considered that was common across those different pivots and those decisions that you made?
So what's interesting, and I love the question because I don't really get that question much, but I've always, when I started my career at Microsoft, I really had a vision. So I started in a local district, the New York, New Jersey district, but I always had a vision. I want a role that's local. I
Mhm.
want a role that's national in scope and responsibility, and then I want a global role. So I
Mm.
had a long range plan because I wanted an impact worldwide. And
Mhm.
so because of that, I grew and I went from different roles. So I was an enterprise seller in the local district and then worked in alliances and channels there. And then when I saw a role around partnerships, partner development, product development nationally, I was like, I want that role. And so I was
Mm.
able to execute and lead teams nationally. And that's when I started understanding, oh, my bosses and my team are not going to be located in my same geography. So how do I lead without necessarily being face to face, right? So this is back when remote work really, I think Microsoft was a leader in remote work even back then. And then when a global role came and I started shifting, so I started doing a lot of volunteer work, started being on different nonprofit boards. I started having an impact more in the Hispanic community. I became like a corporate citizen at Microsoft. And because there were so few Latinos and Latinas, they would say, hey, Julissa, can you speak and represent Microsoft at this women's event? Can you speak and represent Microsoft at this Hispanic? Can you keynote this event? And I was like, gosh, don't we have leaders who do that? But it became clear that I kept saying yes to these
Yes, yes.
opportunities, and this was important to me. So when I shifted to a global role, it was a global role in public sector, Microsoft Education, really creating large impact using education and education technology
Mhm.
in Microsoft Education, working with ministries of education worldwide, working with governors' offices in states in the US. And so it was very strategic in my thinking. And then once I checked all those boxes, I was like, okay, cool, done. So after sort of 13, almost 14 years, I was like, okay, where's the next adventure? And
Mm.
so I gained that cultural competency. Like, how do you do business with people in China? How do you make that work? And in
Mhm.
Israel and in South America and in Latin America. So once I did all that and had success, but also grew in my skill set, it's okay. Next.
Yep.
That was
Next.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that because there's also a level of, there's still some spontaneity in there.
Yes.
There is not, it's not like you had this rigid long-term plan, like you had mapped out it's this role, then this role, then this role. There was
Yes.
some flexibility there. You knew, okay, this is where I want to go, but you didn't have the all the steps mapped out, but you knew enough to know what to look for.
Yes. I think one of the things that I talk about, the first section in my book is called the foundational you.
Mm,
And I think I know for me, that was sort of one area that I knew I wanted to grow in cultural competencies, doing business worldwide, having global responsibilities at a larger scale. I think it's really important that we take time to reflect on what we really want. So I remember a leader, Dominicano too,
mm.
wanted to mentor me, and he was like, Julissa, what do you want? And I was like, gosh, what do I want?
Yeah,
I've got to spend the time to
yeah,
really understand what is the end game for me? What does that look like? And
yeah.
start thinking about that and mapping that out. So
Mhm.
we don't, like, to your point, we don't have to figure it all out, but I think I don't know if we've spent enough of the time reflecting on what it is that we want, and I think it's important to do so. So
Yeah.
I did that, but I think there was more that I needed to do, right, to really flesh it out, but that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay, my
And
opinion.
also, I think even for different points in your career and your life, what you want can morph and change, and that's okay.
Yes.
But having some kind of compass for yourself, like this is what I'm reaching for. This is the purpose of what I'm doing. Because I think what happens is people get lost in what other people want for them because they
Yeah.
haven't taken the time to actually decide for themselves. So that when an opportunity comes, and you say yes because you're flattered versus you say yes because you really want it. And I think for our community, that's a big issue. Like, oh, I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful that you thought of me. I should be so lucky. So I'll take that opportunity when it's not really what you want to do. But you also don't want to disappoint the person who maybe allowed you to have that opportunity. I think we can struggle with that a lot too.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And this is why really doing a lot of the self-work and
Yeah.
self-assessment when you're working, I'll speak for me. As an individual contributor, I was in execution mode. There's strategy, right? You build the strategy for the fiscal year
Yeah.
and you execute. And really, your work is so heads down that you
Mm,
don't really have the time to have that, what do I want? And so the ability to push back and
yeah.
say no becomes critical as you grow in your leadership. And
Yes.
as you grow, I think one of the lessons that I have learned is that the more you do, you're not leading, right? The
Mm,
doers are the executors. So as you grow in your career, you actually have more time to think about what it is that you want, and you grow in your ability to push back and say no to some of the things that may be great things, but not optimal to
that's right.
build your career and to build where you really want to go. I think some of the greatest, one of the, I think, exceptional mentoring sessions that I had was with a chief revenue officer, and he essentially said, how do you want to end your life? And I thought, wow, we're going there, right? It was more of a conversation like, what kind of legacy do you want to
Right.
leave? And so that got me thinking and expanding even broader.
Mhm.
But that was kind of later in my career. I was like, oh, I love this. I love this
Mhm.
idea to really spend that time. So,
Yeah, I love that question for just career life in general. Like, what is the legacy you want to leave, and what do you want to be able to say about your life when you reach the end of it? What do you want to say about how you lived? And
yeah.
I think people get, we in the beginning, you were mentioning how career doesn't happen in isolation. You're living your life, and career is part of your life. And I do it too. I talk about like work and life, but that assumes people understand work is part of your life and isn't your whole entire life.
Yes, yes. Especially I think with Latinos, right? Like right now, my daughter is growing and becoming more independent, and my parents are aging. So I feel like I'm in this sandwich where
Yeah.
my life, right, we're just living life
Mhm.
and doing the best we can while we're managing responsibilities and things that really matter to us. It
Yeah.
matters. So I'm not the sort of person that just talks about career. It's like the whole person. It's
Yes.
well-being,
Yes.
right? It's managing self-care.
Mhm.
It's empowering what you want. And that looks different for every Latina.
Yes.
Success looks different. Like for me, one of the stories that I talk about that really drove kind of me in my life was this fear of being homeless
Mm.
because there was a significant event when my mom divorced my dad, Bobby, and she painted the entire apartment on her own, right? Just so proud. What a moment. And the landlord raised the rent. And so as a 5-year-old, I was like, I've never seen my mom cry.
Uh,
And I just was like, gosh, I never want to be in this position. Like I hugged her, but I was like, this will never happen to me. I will never be poor. I'm gonna have money. And so,
Julissa, wait, I have to stop you because the same thing I said to myself as a child.
no,
Right. Julissa, I'm not kidding you.
stop.
My parents are from Dominican Republic too. And I remember as a child just saying to myself, I will never not have money. I will never experience stress from not having enough money. I will never, I literally remember that I'm like, I'm going to be rich. I mean,
I
because
love
it didn't come from, I wanted to have all this money to spend lavishly. It came from a sense I wanted more security and I wanted to live a life where I wasn't stressed all the time.
yes. Wow, I've never met anyone. I felt like I was a
No,
strange
Julissa, I
little
remember
girl.
repeatedly as a kid being like, that's not going to be
Wow.
me. Yeah.
Wow, no wonder we connect so well.
Yeah.
Not only you look like my cousin, you look like so we've got that going on, but it was such a significant moment, and I didn't realize how much it just drove my decisions. But I'm
Yeah.
glad it did. This moment that was, scary, and obviously my mom figured it out as we Latinas do. We just make things happen.
Always.
And she
Always.
asked for a raise, like an immigrant, Spanish speaking, new to the country, shy, right? Introverted young mother went into her boss and said, I need a raise, and she got it. So
Love
she made it happen. That's where I think doing the inner work really, really matters, and flipping that mindset, something that was scary, actually drove me and propelled me to do the things that I wanted to do, and nothing was going to stop me.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have a fire in your belly. I like Julissa, I've been talking to friends about this because a lot of us are first generation Latina. And I say, I know there's this whole thing about these younger generations where you hear the stories of they don't want to work hard. And I'm not going to opine on any of that. What I will say though is I said, yeah, but are they first generation? Because
Mhm.
I guarantee they have a fire in their belly that is there. It exists. You can't get rid of it. And I've seen it too. I'm sure you've seen it in your roles as a leader. I've seen it as a leader as well, where there are people who just have a different gear. They have a
Yes,
different gear and they themselves push themselves.
yes,
It doesn't matter how high you set that standard, their standard is a little higher for themselves. Like they will themselves.
yes.
They're hungry in a different way. And that to me, I will say this as a leader, I don't think you can teach hunger. You got to have that or you don't have that. What do you think?
Yes, I agree with you. I think I've always thought, okay, if my boss is working this hard, I'm working this harder. That's
Absolutely.
just how I was like, I'm going to give more than I get. And I think that worked really well, really well. And then you've got to pivot. You've
That's
got to,
right. You have to readjust.
got,
Yes.
got to pivot, right? Because if you do that your whole career, obviously everyone, I believe in, people make their choices based on what their values are and what's important to them. But if you want to reach a certain level of, if you want to make a certain amount of money, if you want to reach a certain level in terms of leveling in your career, there's got to be a point where you move from that sort of mindset to I'm driving results through others and through impact and leading and coaching and mentoring and getting things done through others, because that's the only way that you're going to really grow in an organization. The other thing, I know Latina Equal Pay Day is coming up very soon, and Hispanic Heritage Month and all of that. And I think it's really tough, right? Because Latinas, as hard as we work, are not getting paid equally. The equity is just not there. So one of the things that I always am cognizant of is when we talk about our work ethic and our hard work, we've got to equally talk about advocating for ourselves,
Right.
negotiating the best deals, and really putting fear aside. Because as you grow in the organization, like really talk to your leaders and bosses about compensation and ensuring that there's equity, right? Equity across for yourself. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I just think I mentor a lot of young women, young Latinas and Latinos, and they're like, I just negotiated a raise. I just negotiated a package. What if they rescind the offer? No, look at the data. Be bold and be brave, because we will never get to that point until we do so.
Yeah. And no, I agree. And what's interesting is that what I have found is it's those like limiting beliefs that prevent you from doing that. It's but I should be so grateful I have an opportunity. I have an offer. Oh my gosh, my friends don't have a job. Like you start thinking about also where you started from instead of like what would be fair for you and where you want to go. You get stuck in that. And I do think we're not necessarily, especially in the Latino culture, I don't think any of us were necessarily raised to challenge someone senior to us or to challenge authority or challenge the hierarchy. There's a hierarchy and tradition in our culture that has the man usually as the lead, although it's interesting because yes, it's true, but then our grandmothers and our mothers are like also there. But then there's that man of the house. I always find it to be slightly nuanced, but still impacting the way that we view older men when we go to work. There's something that prevents us from challenging, even though that's what our contribution is, even in like in a meeting or you're brainstorming or working through a problem. I find that there's more hesitancy with us because we are taking our conditioning into that situation that doesn't need it. We need to let that conditioning go in that specific situation at work.
And I think that's where really there's some things about our culture that are so valuable and helpful in our careers. Networking, right? Building relationships, caring about people and leadership. So many things, right? Community, connection. Yet we're in an environment where there's so few people of color. And so how do you learn to navigate that strategically, artfully for an impact, right?
Yes.
So it becomes a bit uncomfortable because I think that's where in our cultures, this placating approach versus how to challenge in a strategic way, how to influence. Influencing is our power. That's what we do. That's our community. That's our strength and skill set. But when you do it in an environment that isn't necessarily built for us and we don't know the nuances, it becomes challenging, but still doable. It's doable if we learn how to navigate. So I think we've our limiting beliefs, but also we're in an environment that's not necessarily built for us. And so we've got to really learn. And for me, I had to learn on my own, right? I had to learn by doing. I had to learn by learning from what other people do. One of the tips that I learned from someone that became a mentor, it was a friend first and then became a mentor, we would sit together and just look at the org chart. Who's doing what in the organization? And so we would just spend time doing that. And so we learned who does what and who are the key people that you can speak with so that they're sponsoring your idea or your project or whatever. So those kind of things I don't think we talk about enough, but those are the tactics that help you get to the strategy. At least it was for me.
Yeah. And the whole idea of sitting with an org chart and being strategic, we don't talk about that enough. Like, we don't talk about the conversations you have to have so that you are visible to the right people and that you get buy-in from those people, so that when you're not in the room, they advocate for you, especially people with decision-making authority, right? Like sponsors with decision-making authority who can really advance your career versus mentors who are not always sponsors, right?
Yes.
Mentors, those people who can guide and share and advise, but they may not always also have decision-making authority to actually make sure you get a promotion, essentially. So I think that's such an important point of when you're, even if even people are listening who are mentors, like the kind of mentoring you do is really powerful, and having people with you as mentees, and you can help really teach them how to strategically advance and what really matters. Like, you got to give them the ins and outs, like give them the secrets to what it's.
Exactly. Give them the real deal. Give them the hard truths.
Yes.
I don't write this in the book, but I'm learning more about this when I think back to my career. It's interesting because one of the hard truths is there's some things that you just won't be able to compete in. I'll give you an example. I had a peer who had a boat, and he would invite our executives on his boat. I'm like, I can't compete with the boats. I just cannot, but I can compete in other ways, or I can compete in other ways. So it's really understanding that it's a competition and people are going in hard, like they're going in to win. So what is your tactic? What is your superpower that you can get influence? Like the boat, okay, cool. I can't compete there.
Yeah.
You win with the boat, but where else can I compete? And that's one of the things that as like a madrina, I feel like that's a hard truth, right? There's things you can control
That's
and
right.
things you cannot control. So
Yes. And you know what's funny? You said that boat story because, again, this is probably why we're connected. When I was very early in my career, when I was a lawyer at one of the law firms I worked at, literally I was a first year associate. So you're like a sponge. You're just trying to work really hard and just a sponge. And we went to lunch, like I think a group of maybe 5 or 6 of us went to lunch, and it was me and like a couple of other associates that are my level and a few partners at the firm. And they were all talking about their boats. And my associates, these 2 or 3 other associates that were with me that were my peers, were talking about how they had sailed around the Caribbean in their boats. And that whole lunch, I was like, wow, I've never felt so Latina in this.
yes.
I also never felt so poor. I never felt so like just othered, right? Like and no, it's okay if they want to talk about their boats. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that in that moment, I was like, wow, we have totally different life experiences.
Yes.
And in that moment, it just double clicked for me. And this is why I'm going to work my ass off, because what's going to matter is not your boat. It's going to be the quality of your work.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And the boat thing is a shiny object, which is super cool. I love a boat. I'm not going to complain.
I know.
I love being on a boat, right?
We're not
if
trying to
anybody wants to invite us on their boats, we will take the invitation happily. But yeah, so it's a shiny object for the moment. And so the thing with, it's going back to what you were saying, is that inner drive that you can't teach, and that inner hunger. And I think it's those moments that really show us who we are, because we're like, okay, we can't compete there, but we will compete. And how can we compete to win? So yeah.
Julissa, so you've mentioned your book multiple times. I want to talk about the book. Let's talk about first talk a little bit more about the inspiration for the book, the impetus for you to write the book, and then and we'll dive in, but give us a few key, like, hard truths, as you mentioned. What are some hard truths you mentioned in the book?
Yeah, thanks. The impetus of this book really came out of a couple of things. So one, gratitude. I started thinking about writing this book at a time where things were going so well. I loved my team, I loved my job, things were going well at home, family was doing well. And I was like, okay, we need to take this higher, right? Like, what do we need to do to really take life higher? And I'm a woman of faith, so I prayed. I was like, God, I want to go on an adventure with you. Like, let's just do something fun together. So I spent some time just dreaming and thinking about, legacy. Like, what do I want to do? And Latinas, there's so few of us who are leaders and even fewer of us who are in the C-suite. And that was my goal, right? That was the goal. And for me, and I achieved it by having my own company. So sometimes you just got to do things and pivot in a
Yes.
different way. But it came out of knowing the privilege of being of the 2% of Latinas who are in leaders. And honestly, too, I just was like, I want to share with those who are coming after me because there's so few of us telling our stories.
Yeah.
And I noticed that those who are sugarcoating. I was
Yeah.
like, that is not helping me. And
Mhm.
so I start the intro with, and Mana, so tell us, how did you get to the C-suite? How did you become that 1%? It cannot have been that easy because I know my career has not been easy for me,
Yeah.
right? It has been great and successful, but hard, like really hard. And so I wanted to write a book where it's not a memoir, but I just wanted to share what I've learned so that other Latinas who want to be leaders in tech and in business, they're not surprised. I feel like I was just surprised by so many things like, oh my goodness, this guy is coming at me and coming
Yeah.
after me.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a reason for doing that, right? He's competing with me. Or this is happening here. My pay is not equal to others. Well, look at the statistics about how Latinas are the lowest paid gender and ethnic group. Like don't be surprised by these things that microaggressions and the
Mhm.
othering. Well, there are not enough Latinos and people of color in leadership positions so that this is a common, you know, group of people that you're just engaging with at work.
Mhm.
So there were some things that I just felt like I am not going to sugarcoat. I'm just not.
Mhm.
I'm going
Mhm.
to talk about some ugly things, some hard truths that because I don't want others to feel alone. I very much felt alone in my career. Like I've got to figure this out on my own. But I also had support and mentors and sponsors, but not enough because I don't think I knew how to ask
Mm.
for that, how
Mm.
to ask for help. And so I felt like many ways I had to do this on my own. So I was like, no, I'm going to tell a little bit of my stories. It's not all of it because that would be 10 books. But I'm going to share what I have learned and in the hopes that it'll help others. And I think so that's the impetus for the book and the why behind it. Yeah.
I love that because I think the only times I feel like most times we get truth of a story, like how hard something really is in like a one-on-one conversation or like a small group conversation with, but it's not like I'm going to put this in a book and I'm going to give this to you as a resource so that you can't say I didn't tell you. Or you have some kind of, I would say, like validation when you experience something. You're like, oh, right. Julissa told me about this in this Latina Madrina book. Like she told me this would happen to me, or she told me like what happened to her. And that's similar. Okay, here's what I can take from that. Here's how I can shift that for myself.
One of the things that it's a hard truth, this has been my experience, it may not be everybody's experiences, I can only talk for my own experiences, is while I had some great leaders and bosses, I had so many more that were worse. I mean,
Mhm.
expect to have horrible
Yeah.
bosses
Yeah.
that don't help you, advocate for you, are not on your side, they've got their favorites. It just is what it is. But what can you learn from
Hmm.
those bosses for your own leadership style, right? So learn from them, observe them, know what you don't want, and then look for those leaders and those great bosses that you want to work with that see your value and your skill set, that want to optimize you for the team, that are pushing you up and challenging you to grow, who are looking for opportunities. And there are other things that don't think your boss is going to be your career coach.
Right.
Your
Right.
boss is not your madrina. Your boss is not your executive coach. Your boss is not your bestie. Your
Right.
boss is there for you to execute for that team. And so understanding your boss's motivation is critical. And the truth is, once we're leaders, we have those same motivations as well. We want to ensure that the team stays intact so that it's just easier for us to execute with the people that we do know. So those are just some hard things that I'm like, I don't think we talk enough about this.
Yeah. And
So
I don't think we talk enough about, and I saw a lot. I saw a lot when I left the law to do more HR focused work. And I will say, even friends I know who were people managers too, I'm going to say not everybody should be a people manager. They should stay an individual contributor because they have no desire to develop people. They just have no desire to do that. And if you don't even want to do that, but you feel like you're compelled to, you still may not do it. And who that hurts is your team. But I also think that for that is true. And what is also true is complaining about it and dwelling on it is not going to be helpful. Like it's important to express and be like, I'm really frustrated. That is okay with a close group of friends that you trust. But I think wallowing, like to your point, okay, what can I do about this? Like I can't control that this person doesn't really care about my career. So I can't control that, but I can control the quality of my work. I can't control the relationships I build outside of this team. I can control, like, what can you control? And then focus your attention and energy there so you feel less drained by your manager who is not going to be there for you.
Yes. And the great thing is that leaders change, they come in and out of the organization. At least that's been my experience, right? There's at Microsoft, at Salesforce, it was constant. I called it fruit basket turnover. Every fiscal year, there was a change. Like, let the fruit, and it's okay, now this is my leader and all this stuff. So there's an opportunity to reinvent yourself with a new leader, right? There's an opportunity to build connection and credibility and trust with new leaders. And there's an opportunity, like your manager and your leader is just one person, like one person in the whole universe of your career. And the truth is, we're not a tree. Like we can move. If it doesn't work, move, pivot, and all of that.
So Julissa, tell me now, we're not pivoting because this is probably related to your book as well, but I would love for you to share before we start wrapping up. I would love for you to share number one piece of advice that you would give our audience for them finding their own path to fulfillment and success.
I think that being a successful Latina or a successful Latina leader is so individual. And so I go back to, what do you want, right? What that Dominican leader asked me, what do you want? Not just for your career, but for your life, and really be thoughtful about it. We drive our life and our career. There are many things we can control, while there's things that we cannot control. And the biggest thing is really enjoy it, like this is the journey, and take care of yourself, take care of the people you love and your family. But I just would say, be super clear about what you want and surround yourself with the people that really lift you up and build you up. Find your hype squad, but enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey.
I love that. And that's something that people say, oh, I'm going to enjoy when I retire. And I'm like, first of all, you don't get to decide when you go. You don't get to decide that. Also, like you're living life now. You're living it now. Like you can't afford to not live and enjoy like the fruits of your labor also, right? Responsibly, like you gotta be responsible. But yeah, no, I love that. Wait, Julissa, what's your favorite book? Or favorite books other than your own, because you of course yours is going to be your favorite.
I'm a woman of faith, so I have to say I love my Bible. I read it every day, and I'm inspired by the words in the scriptures for so many reasons. So it's my daily, it's how I spend time every morning reading the verse of the day, the scripture of the day. So I just love that. Outside of that, I'm really inspired by this book called Unapologetically Ambitious by Shelley Archambault. I read that book maybe 2 to 3 years ago, and I think once I read it, it's like you highlight, you underline. She was the first African-American woman to lead a tech organization. And it's just gold, honestly. Don't walk, pick up this book. I love the title because I've always felt like I was unapologetically ambitious, but I was told, slow your world. Don't take it easy. Right? Learn out all that. And I was like, yeah. And so I just love the title, but the book is incredible. And there's so many other books. There's one book, How to Be CEO, that's like really crisp, clear, good, actionable strategy. So,
Oh, I love that. Okay. I'll put that in the notes. Okay, Julissa, last question for everybody who's loved this conversation, who wants to buy the book, who wants to find you and connect with you. How can they do that?
So you can go to latinamadrina.com. You can buy my book there on Amazon on September 15th. And I am on social. Connect with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, Latina Madrina. I'm learning TikTok. Me and my 40 followers are having a good time over there.
It's better than my zero. That's better than my zero.
Like trying to figure it out. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's not easy, but it's great over there. And so that's how you can find me. And it's really been incredibly gratifying. People say, "Hey, Madrina, I've learned so much from you." And I'm just like, this is so cool. And that's really what I want. I want to help. We're already empowered, but just to give some tools and some strategies that will help our community
Yes,
just to
yes.
thrive, not just in career, but like life.
Julissa, I want to thank you so much. I will throw all of those links. I'm going to throw all those links in the show notes. So for anyone who's listening, you just scroll down in the episode and you'll find all the ways to connect with Julissa. I'll make sure I throw those all in the show notes. Julissa, thank you so much for being with me today. I am so looking forward to a long and amazing friendship with you. I know this is amazing.
This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah.
I appreciate you so much. I really do. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me on your show. It's been so fun talking to you and getting to know you too.